Someone called a chess club in Liverpool on the evening of the 19th of January, 1931. They gave a false name. They gave an address that did not exist anywhere in the city. 24 hours later, a woman was dead. Her skull had been struck 11 times. The blood reached the walls, the floor, the furniture. Her husband had not a single drop on him. Not one. He had 21 minutes. The jury convicted him. The Court of Criminal Appeal, for the first time in British legal history, said the jury was wrong. No one else was ever charged. The question this case asks is not who killed Julia Wallace. The question is what it means that a court can overturn a conviction, return a man to his life, and then do nothing while the person who made that phone call is simply never found. 93 years later, that question still has no answer. Liverpool, January 1931. The city was deep in depression. The docks that had made it one of the wealthiest ports in the empire were going quiet. Men who had worked the waterfront for decades were standing in bread queues. But in the terraced streets of Anfield, neat, respectable, determinedly ordinary life moved to a slower rhythm. Insurance agents did their rounds on foot. Chess clubs met on Monday evenings. Neighbours knew each other's milk delivery schedules. This was not a world of violent crime. It was a world of routine. What happened at 29 Wolverton Street on the evening of Tuesday, the 20th of January, shattered that routine permanently. Raymond Chandler called it the impossible murder. He meant it as a compliment to reality. William Herbert Wallace was born in 1878 in Milham, Cumberland, a small, grey town on the edge of the Lake District. He was not a remarkable man in the conventional sense. He had worked as a draper's apprentice, as a colonial outfitter in Calcutta, as a Liberal Party election agent in Harrogate. He had lost a kidney to surgery before the First World War. He walked slowly and was never in robust health. By 1915, he had settled in Liverpool, working as a collections agent for the Prudential Assurance Company. His territory, the Club Moor district, a tight grid of terraced streets where he walked the same route for 16 years, knocking on the same doors, collecting the same premiums. His colleagues described him as calm, pleasant, methodical. In his spare time, he lectured part-time in chemistry at Liverpool Technical College. He studied botany. He read Marcus Aurelius. He was, by every account, a man of deliberate intellectual life. In Harrogate, he had met a woman named Julia Dennis. Julia was, according to all early records, approximately the same age as Wallace. It was only in 2170 years after the murder that a researcher examining her original birth certificate discovered the truth. Julia Wallace was born in 1861. She was 17 years older than her husband, a fact she had concealed, possibly even from him. She was an accomplished pianist. Wallace had taught himself the violin so they could have what contemporaries described as musical evenings, the two of them in the front parlour, playing together in a terraced house in Anfield. They had no children, they had each other, and then, on the 20th of January, 1931, they didn't. The evening before the murder, Monday, the 19th of January, Wallace arrived at the Liverpool Central Chess Club at the City Café at approximately 7:45 p.m. He was there for a scheduled tournament match. Before he could sit down, the club captain, a man named Samuel Beattie, approached him. 20 minutes earlier, at around 7:20 p.m., a telephone call had come through for Wallace. The caller gave his name as R.M. Qualtrough. He said he had insurance business. Could Mr. Wallace call on him the following evening at 25 Menlove Gardens East at 7:30 p.m. Wallace had never heard the name Qualtrough in his life. Note the name, note the time. We will return to both. The following morning, Tuesday the 20th, Wallace did his insurance rounds as usual. His clients reported he was his normal, pleasant self. He arrived home just after 6 p.m., having stopped to take tea with a client. According to Wallace, he left the house at approximately 6:45 p.m. via the back door, heading for his Qualtrough appointment. He boarded a series of trams south across the city. On one of them, he turned to the conductor and said unprompted, "I am a complete stranger to these parts." He arrived at Menlove Gardens to find Menlove Gardens North, Menlove Gardens South, Menlove Gardens West, no East. Wallace knocked on 25 Menlove Gardens West. A woman answered, "No Qualtrough." He asked a constable on his beat. The officer confirmed no Menlove Gardens East existed anywhere in the district. He made inquiries at the corner newsagents. Nobody could help him. After approximately 45 minutes of searching, Wallace gave up and returned home. It was now approaching 8:45 p.m. In the back alleyway of Wolverton Street, he encountered his neighbours John and Florence Johnston heading out for an evening walk. Wallace told them he could not gain entry. The front door was locked from the inside. The back door was the same. The Johnstons watched as Wallace tried the back door a second time. It opened. They offered to wait outside. At least a full minute passed. Then Wallace reappeared in the doorway. "Come and see," he said. "They've killed her." Julia Wallace had been bludgeoned to death in the front parlour of 29 Wolverton Street. The first officer on scene noted her body was still slightly warm. She had been struck at least 11 times. The blood distribution across the parlour walls and floor indicated a sustained, close-range assault. The cranial damage was catastrophic. The murder weapon was never recovered. Beneath her body, tucked underneath, as though placed deliberately, was a Macintosh, Wallace's Macintosh. He confirmed this immediately. It was saturated in blood. Part of it had been burned. Here is what was not found. Not a single drop of blood on William Herbert Wallace. His suit, examined that night and again in the days following, showed nothing. The bathroom upstairs confirmed the same. The taps had not been used. The bath showed no signs of recent use. The towels were dry. The drains were clean. The only trace of blood found outside the parlour was a single small clot on the rim of the lavatory pan, the origin of which investigators could not establish. £4 were missing from the household cash box, but the cash box itself had been carefully replaced inside the kitchen cabinet. The cabinet door had been forced, just the one door in a house, where a glass jar containing a wad of pound notes sat in the bedroom untouched. One of those notes had a bloodstain on it. Julia's handbag lay nearby. The money and silver inside it had not been touched. The first pathologist, a doctor, John McFall, examined the body for rigor mortis and estimated the time of death at approximately 8 p.m. The official police surgeon, arriving later, revised that to approximately 6 p.m. Both were using rigor mortis only. Both, as would later be demonstrated, may have been wrong. Because a 14-year-old milk delivery boy named Alan Close came forward the following day. Close said he had delivered milk to 29 Wolverton Street that evening. He was certain he had spoken to Julia on the doorstep, and he was certain it was after 6:30 p.m., no later than 6:45. If Julia Wallace was alive and standing at her own front door at 6:45 p.m. and William Herbert Wallace boarded his first tram at 7:06 p.m. that left a window of precisely 21 minutes. 21 minutes to commit a frenzied, blood-saturated attack, to conceal the murder weapon without a trace, to remove every drop of blood from his person, to walk 1/3 of a mile to the tram stop. Wallace was 52 years old, one kidney. His colleagues called him a slow mover. The police, attempting to recreate this timeline, sent a fit young detective through the same motions at pace. He barely made it. 21 minutes. The prosecution's entire case rested on it. The telephone call that launched this case was made from a K1 phone box. That phone box stood exactly 400 yards from Wallace's front door. Samuel Beattie, the chess club captain who took the call, had known Wallace for years. When investigators asked him directly whether the voice could have been Wallace's, Beattie was unequivocal. He was quite certain it was not. And yet the police built their entire theory on the proposition that Wallace and Qualtrough were the same man. That Wallace had fabricated a false appointment, sent himself to the other side of the city, and murdered his wife in the window his own absence had created. This is the psychological question at the center of this case, and it has divided criminologists for 90 years. Because if this was a construction, the architecture of it reveals a very specific kind of mind. A mind that plans in advance, that uses institutional systems, the chess club, the tram network, the language of insurance appointments as scaffolding for deception, that understands how forensic evidence works, and deliberately engineers absence. No weapon, no blood. No witness who can place him inside the house at the critical time. Criminologists who study what the FBI's behavioral science unit calls the organized offender recognize this profile. Methodical, cold, capable of extraordinary emotional regulation under pressure. A planner who commits not in heat, but in what one analyst called cold arithmetic. By those measures, Wallace fits in certain respects. He was intelligent, he was controlled. His composure at trial was noted by every reporter in the room as something beyond ordinary stoicism. One courtroom observer described it as enigmatic. The jury, ultimately, read that composure as guilt. But the profile fractures at a critical point. A planner of this sophistication does not make his alibi call from 400 yards away. He does not tell a tram conductor he is a stranger to streets he has, in fact, visited before. He does not leave his own Macintosh under the body. These are not the details of cold arithmetic. They are either the details of a man who did not do this, or a man whose careful plan was already unraveling, and he didn't know it yet. There is a third name. Richard Gordon Parry was 22 years old in January 1931. He had worked alongside Wallace at the Prudential between 1928 and 1929, covering Wallace's collection rounds when the older man was ill. He knew the house at 29 Wolverton Street. He knew Wallace's habits. He knew the exact days Wallace collected premiums and approximately how much cash would be in that cash box on a Tuesday evening. Wallace had private evidence that Parry had been pocketing premiums during that period. For reasons that were never fully explained, he did not report it. On the night of the 20th of January, Parry drove to a garage near Liverpool late in the evening and requested the use of a high-pressure hose. A mechanic present that night later told investigators that he had noticed one of Parry's gloves. It was soaked in blood. Parry died in 1980 before he was ever formally questioned. His alibi for the night of the murder had been provided by his then-fiancée. That woman, years later after Wallace was dead and she had been jilted by Parry, alleged that the alibi was false. Her retraction was never tested in any court. William Herbert Wallace stood trial at the Liverpool Assizes on the 22nd of April, 1931. The case against him was entirely circumstantial. The prosecution offered no physical evidence placing him at the scene at the time of death. No weapon, no blood, no witness. What the prosecution offered was this: possibility, mathematics, and manner. The 21-minute window was presented as proof of possibility. Wallace's composure, his calm, his controlled effect, his apparent absence of visible grief was presented as evidence of a man too contained to be innocent. Before the Liverpool proceedings began, the Prudential Assurance Company's own staff union took an extraordinary step. They conducted a secret mock trial in London. Their jury found Wallace not guilty, unanimously. The company then sponsored his legal defense, an act without precedent. It made no difference. The Liverpool jury deliberated for 1 hour. Guilty. Sentenced to death. In May 1931, the Court of Criminal Appeal did something it had never done before in British legal history. It quashed the conviction not on a procedural error, not because of judicial misconduct, but because, in the court's own words, the verdict cannot be supported, having regard to the evidence. The jury, the appeal court ruled, had simply been wrong. Wallace walked free. He returned to his job at the Prudential. But Anfield did not forgive him. His clients shunned him. The streets where he had worked for 16 years went cold. He received hate mail. He received physical threats. He moved to a bungalow in Bromborough on the Wirral and took a desk job at his employer's head office. His private diaries have survived. They speak of his grief for Julia, of his uncertainty about whether they would meet again in whatever came after, and of his growing certainty stated in his own hand about who had killed his wife. He did not name the man in the diaries. He died on the 26th of February, 1933, 54 years old, uremia and kidney failure, less than 2 years after the appeal that should have given him his life back. He was buried in Anfield Cemetery beside Julia, 2 names on 1 stone. The murder of Julia Wallace has never been officially solved. No other person was ever charged. What the evidence leaves us with, after 93 years, is absence. No weapon, no blood trail, no confession, no conviction that held, just a dead woman on a parlour floor. A cash box with £4 missing and put back neatly. A Macintosh soaked in blood that should not have been there. A phone call made from 400 yards away. And a young man with blood on his glove who washed his car in the middle of the night and died before anyone could sit him down and ask why. Raymond Chandler called this one impossible. He was being precise. Here is what I will leave you with. There are 2 men in this story whose behavior cannot be fully explained by the evidence. William Wallace, who either planned a murder with extraordinary cold precision and left almost no forensic trace, or walked into a trap so perfectly constructed he could not have recognized it until the door was already closed behind him. And Richard Gordon Parry, who knew the house, knew the cash, had blood on his glove at the end of that night, and whose alibi dissolved only when it was too late to mean anything at all. The jury in 1931 chose Wallace. The Court of Criminal Appeal chose neither. The question this case leaves, and has left for nearly a century, is not simply who did it. It is this: what kind of mind is capable of constructing an alibi this precise, and what kind of man is capable of sitting through a murder trial for something he did not do and never once breaking? I'll leave that with you. Crim Unsealed investigates the cases history tried to bury, using court records, inquest testimony, and primary documents. No speculation, no dramatization. The record read carefully. If that is the kind of history you are looking for, subscribe. Every case we cover is one the standard accounts have softened or set aside. The next one is already being built. The record deserves to be read.